Hi, welcome to the Arizona Computer Science Professional Development video series. This is series number 2 on the essential concepts in the computer science standards. This is the third video on the networks and the internet overarching concept. My name is Dan Schneider. I'm a high school computer science teacher here in Arizona and a member of the Arizona chapter of the Computer Science Teachers Association. So first, an overview. The Arizona Computer Science Standards are organized into 5 overarching concepts that span all grade levels. Today, we'll be focusing only on the networking and the internet concept. When reading the standards themselves, they are organized first by grade level, then by concept, then subconcept, and lastly, an identifying number. In today's video, we'll only be looking at the networking and the internet standards, which have an NI code in the second position. Our goals today are to understand this core concept at a broad level and its 2 subconcepts, network communication organization and cybersecurity, so that we can guide a progression of knowledge from elementary through high school. We'll look at examples of these standards in different grade bands, K through 5, 6 through 8, and 9, 12. We'll also look at ways that teachers may already be emphasizing these concepts in their classrooms, especially in the earlier grade levels, and examine resources and lesson ideas that teachers can use to teach these concepts. So first, broad overview. What are networks and the internet as a concept? We can explore this by considering what happens when we try to visit a website. One of our first considerations is understanding all the steps in between when we enter a website to visit and when it ultimately shows up on our screen. As soon as we press enter in our web browser, our message is broken up into smaller pieces called packets that all travel through a series of other devices and networks before ultimately making their way out into the internet, where our message has to be reassembled again in order to be processed and understood. In earlier grade levels, students can experience this and model this process through collaborative information sharing games or challenges that may already be happening in your classroom. At higher grade levels, students begin to study the specific network designs and devices that make sure we can communicate with the rest of the world. Another consideration is the physical design of the networks we use every day. At school, students may be most familiar with devices that use a physical cable to connect to a network. But at home or in their community, they may be more familiar with wireless or cellular signals as a way to communicate on a network. Starting around upper elementary, students are asked to consider the advantages and disadvantages of how networks communicate, especially considering qualities such as speed, reliability, or the volume of information that can be sent at once. In high school, students consider the social and cultural implications of access to the internet, considering how much access to the internet they may have in their personal lives, and comparing it to other communities here in the US and around the world who may not have that same access. Lastly, students consider how secure our communications are. The subconcept of cybersecurity explores strategies for protecting our private information and ensuring criminals can't access it. This involves exploring strategies that computers use to protect information, such as encryption, as well as strategies that humans use to protect information, such as using good passwords, being careful with private information online, and using common sense browsing habits. In early grades, many of these strategies overlap with digital citizenship efforts, but these standards also challenge students to think beyond just themselves and their own personal habits, and instead to consider what strategies can be implemented by entire organizations or the networks themselves to protect against data loss and identity theft. So more formally, here is a summary of the networks and the internet concept, as well as its 2 subconcepts. These summaries appear in the standards themselves. I'm not going to take time to read these out loud, but I invite you to pause this video and read through these more formal summaries in order to start seeing how these concepts are first introduced and progress through the grade levels. Awesome. Let's start by looking at some standards in the earlier grade levels. I've selected 2 standards from grade 1. And generally speaking, in the early grade levels, the focus is on awareness of the times that we are protecting our personal information and the times we are using devices to connect with others. This focus on awareness helps scaffold to later standards where students take a more active role in designing and analyzing these networked connections and the ways in which people protect personal information. This also means these standards may be integrated into existing activities or lessons, especially those that rely on the internet to facilitate an activity, such as having a virtual guest speaker via Skype. Students can also bring experiences from their personal lives if they use technology at home to communicate with family members out of state or even out of the country. Another key point is that many standards at this level include the phrase with teacher guidance, acknowledging that students still need assistance making these connections and using vocabulary correctly. Guiding students through technology is a key aspect of standards at this level, making students more aware of when they are using networks to communicate or when they are making decisions to protect their own personal information. Many of these standards can be incorporated into work you are already doing, but another useful resource is the K5 is Not Just Coding repository of lessons and resources. If there are particular standards that seem too disconnected from the work that's already happening, this website is a great resource for how you can incorporate these standards more intentionally into the classroom. In upper elementary, we have several standards that begin to show the focus on connections between these concepts and the real world impacts. A theme in upper elementary is making these connections to personal experiences and current events, especially when considering cybersecurity events and protecting personal information. Students can draw from their own experiences on the internet or those of family members to see examples where protecting personal information is important. Similarly, students can draw on their own lived experiences using internet-connected devices to compare and contrast different network types. For example, students may already have experienced subtle differences in how the internet behaves depending on which type of connection they're using, such as watching a video on a school computer versus watching a video on a cell phone connection. A foundation is also being created for students to understand how information travels across a network, including being broken into smaller pieces called packets and traveling through several intermediary devices that help navigate these packets to their proper destination, called routers. This process is further developed and formalized in middle and high school, but at this stage, an important verb that appears in the standards is model. This allows teachers to design games or activities as one way to emphasize these standards, including ones that may already be used in the classroom, such as a collaborative math review game where students may be passing and rearranging information as a team to solve problems, or an ELA activity where students collaboratively write one line of a story before reordering and reconfiguring the final entire piece. It's possible many of these collaborative activities and review games can be slightly adapted to more concretely connect to these standards. A great resource at this level has been put together by the Gilbert Public Schools and includes activities at each standard broken down by grade level, as well as advice for how to tweak activities you are probably already doing so they meet these standards. This resource has resources available from kindergarten through 5th grade. Highly recommend if you're an elementary school teacher. In middle school, we start to get more concrete with our computer science terminology and concepts while continuing to find opportunities to integrate into other subjects. Building on the foundation earlier grades for how information physically travels across a network, we begin to introduce the concept of a protocol, which describes the logical rules for how information travels across this network. This becomes more concrete in high school, but at this level, students begin to understand protocols as rules for how to communicate. This is a ripe opportunity to have students bring in experience from their personal lives as they reflect on their own hidden rules for communicating effectively, such as the differences between how you talk to your grandparents versus how you talk to your friends or younger siblings. Teachers can also connect protocols to classroom routines, such as structured ways to ask permission to use the restroom or answer certain types of questions. When you have encoded a particular type of response as a classroom routine, that's an example of a communication protocol. Students are also introduced to the concept of encryption, which is the act of obscuring information so it can be sent securely and secretly across a network. At this level, students are concretely introduced to several cryptography systems, such as a Caesar cipher or transposition cipher, as a way to introduce the broader concept of encryption and hiding information. At this level, cryptography can be implemented in fun puzzles or challenges to decipher secret information or send secret messages, which can be fun for students and incorporate into other areas. Many of these strategies are mathematically based, making them an apt choice to incorporate as fun exercises in math classrooms. If some of this terminology, like Caesar cipher and transposition cipher, seems a little daunting, there's a great resource available in the CS Unplugged website. There are several specific activities and resources that can be used at these middle school level. These can be used as standalone lessons or integrated into other subjects or turned into a little mini unit covering cryptography. A high school level, the standards become much more concrete and specific in the knowledge should have around networks and the internet. You begin to see specific vocabulary and skills that students must be familiar with, such as denial of service or ransomware or router or MAC address. Students are also invited to bring their own interests and experiences into the classroom by researching current events for cybersecurity cases and reflecting on the usability and security protocols that they use in their own lives or when participating in other areas, such as at school or in a business or at home. These standards lend themselves well to research projects and tangible applications for creating secure networks, although this may require some additional specialized software or equipment to implement. One important note about the standards at this level is that we have banded standards. There are not individual ninth grade or 10th grade standards, but rather standards for all of high school. This gives schools flexibility in the courses they offer, as well as students flexibility in which courses they may take and when they may take them. One resource that acts as a strong introduction to these standards is the Nova Cybersecurity Lab Simulator and the videos that accompany it. There are also several projects students can participate in to demonstrate mastery of these standards, such as performing a security audit of an organization or network, such as for a local business or school, and provide recommendations for potential security risks and how to avoid or alleviate them. Students can also demonstrate mastery by designing and implementing their own local area network using networking equipment and devices. This can be done via simulations as part of a larger networking curricula, or it can be done physically with the support of a school IT department or local business as part of a work-based learning program. So, thanks for taking this journey with us. We've reached the end of the video. As a reminder, here are our goals for today. And hopefully you have a more firm understanding of how the networks and the internet concept is developed through the standards, as well as some specific standards and resources you can investigate further. On that note, there are also some additional, more broad resources that may be of interest. We're grateful for the work of organizations here in Arizona and also around the nation for curating and sharing these teacher-vetted resources and strategies. Many resources are being curated at the Arizona Department of Education website, including those resources from the Gilbert Public Schools. The Computer Science Teachers Association Arizona chapter posts updates and news that are relevant to Arizona teachers, as well as different professional development opportunities. Computer Science in San Francisco has curated several resources across the K-8 spectrum, including whole curricula and units that can be used in classroom. The New York City CS for All initiative has gathered several videos and strategies and pedagogical techniques that can be used in a computer science classroom, as well as several curricula. And lastly, as mentioned before, the CS Unplugged website is a great resource for implementing computer science without necessarily having access to computers. We hope this video has been helpful, hope these resources are helpful, and happy teaching.